How you guys doing? Good to see you. I'm Geoff Keighley. Welcome to Retro to Real Time here at QuakeCon. I want to say hi to everybody watching live on the Twitch stream as well. You guys having a good QuakeCon so far? Love the energy. All right, so who has played Doom multiplayer so far? All right, good sampling. People. How many people came to the Fallout presentation yesterday? Exactly. All the people watching online are extremely jealous right now because they didn't get to see it. But it was pretty cool. We've got a great panel for you here with some friends of mine from the game industry. And the title of it is From Retro to Real Time. We're going to talk about some of our favorite memories playing games back from the original Doom back in 1993. I remember downloading the shareware version of that. How many of you guys played Doom back in 1993? All right, we got some old school id fans. I like it. So all the way through to today, which is the new Doom. So let me just bring out our panelists, and we'll get into this discussion. If you guys have questions for us, line up at the mic. We'd like to make this interactive with everyone here in the audience. So here we go. First up, we've got the executive editor of Game Informer magazine, Andrew Reiner. Reiner's here. Wrote a great story on Fallout. If you haven't seen it, head to GameInformer.com. Reiner. Wow, good crowd. To see you. Thanks for joining us, Reiner. Good to see you, man. Next up, we've got the one of the hosts of GameStop TV and the producer of Bonus Round, my show on game trailers, Andrea Rene. Come on out, Andrea Rene.
What's up, everybody?
Everyone gets entrance music.
What's up, man?
Like the WWE. All right. Next up, a man you know very well. I worked with him for many years at G4. You saw him co-host the Bethesda E3 pre and post show. He is the one and only Adam Sessler, everybody. Sess.
Thank you.
What's up, Sess?
How are you?
And finally, a man who needs no introduction here at QuakeCon, the VP of Marketing and PR at Bethesda, Mr. Pete Hines. Welcome, Pete.
How are you,
Good to see you. All right, so Retro to Real Time. This was a title that Reiner came up with. His buddy Kamal, who can't be here.
Nanjiani, yeah.
He's filming the X-Files, so Kamal can't be here. But tell us before we get into this, Reiner, what did you want? Retro to Real Time. It's a really interesting title. What did you want us to talk about today? What does that title mean to you?
20 years of QuakeCon, right? So there's a lot of history there, and Doom is, what is it, 22 years old? 93?
Yeah, it was December 93. Yeah.
And it's being rebooted now, so
yeah.
It just seemed like the perfect topic to discuss what was there once and where we are now.
Yeah, as I said when I opened this, I remember like December, I think it was like 10th of 1993. I was like sitting at home. I still remember the moment I downloaded Doom because like my PC had never done anything like that before. And it was just like, wow. And there was an online magazine called Game Bytes that was out at the time, and it was this digital magazine you would download on CompuServe, and it would include like digital screenshots of games. So it would be like these text fields, and I just remember before Doom came out, they had like 3 screenshots of Doom, and you would load up Game Bytes. You would hit like, I think it was like the F6 key, and it would call up the screenshots, and I'd just sit there and marvel at like the graphics of the screenshot. Like, I don't think my PC's gonna be able to do this. And then when I downloaded it, I'm like, wow, it actually can do this. It was absolutely insane, and it's crazy that was 20 plus years ago.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get into some of our favorite retro games over time, sort of this past 23 years. Some of our favorite memories playing games, certainly on PC, but also console. Andrea, retro to real time. Do you prefer old school games? Do you like to go back and play old classics, or are you going to do games stand the test of time? That's one interesting thing about this industry is like a lot of games, and now with things like Steam, obviously you can go back. It's much easier to play them, but a lot of the history of games, it's hard to go back and play them sometimes.
It is. Well, emulators have definitely made it accessible. I mean, you can find almost any game, by using emulators, which is fantastic. But I have found in my personal experience, most of the games that I enjoyed when I was younger don't have that same magic they had when I was a kid. It's like going back and watching some of your old cartoons that you loved when you were a kid, and you're like, why did I watch this so much? You don't really remember why, but I mean, there are certain classics that I always, whenever I see them in an arcade that I play, like Ms. Pac-Man, for example. Like, if I ever see that game, I'm always going to play it no matter what. So stuff like that I really love, but we've come so far in the evolution of video games that why would you not want to play all of the amazing new stuff that's happening? Because thousands of games out there every single year. It's impossible to play them all. Like, don't go back, just go forward.
And Adam, you and I have been doing this for a long time. I mean, a lot of the games we covered back in the day are the games that now today's designers are using as kind of inspiration for today's games. When you play games these days, I mean, do you recollect like moments from the past when you're playing these games of like, oh, I can see that this is inspired by Doom or this is inspired by Half-Life?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say you're like, okay, this is a direct connection to that game, but you start to see the legacy. You know, you go back and you look at something like Thief, or you look at something like Deus Ex. I mean, those are so informative to the sense of, if not like the open world game, the game that lets you figure out how you want to play it, how you have to become inventive in the environment. I mean, those are kind of the trailblazers of that type of design, and yes, I always think of them.
Now, Pete, I remember back in the day, before you were doing this Bethesda thing, you were writing about games for Adrenaline Vault. I remember, everyone remember A Vault?
No.
You are now officially old.
A Vault. But, I mean, you were playing a lot of these games back in the day, Pete, and in many ways, I'm sure that inspired you to want to get into the business of creating games.
Yep, for sure. You know, for me, you know, the stuff that holds special place in my heart is, you know, I talked about this at my story time at PAX. Like, you know, the first game you stayed up all night playing, all the gold box AD&D stuff that really made me fall in love with role-playing games. I wasn't actually a first-person shooter guy, just because I have and still have motion sickness problem with first-person shooters. So it was a long time before I ever tried them. You know, it's great to so many years later, you know, talking to the guys from Machine Games or really developers from any studio who talk about a game like Doom and, you know, the impact that modding or just playing that game had on them and making them want to be a part of this industry that, you know, that those games from so long ago are still resonating with the people who are now so instrumental in making, which is probably why you see influences of those old games and folks hearkening back to some of the things that made those retro games so memorable.
Absolutely. So it's been, you know, 20 plus years since Doom came out. Obviously, that was a seminal kind of first-person shooter, as you said, inspired so many games after it. But Reiner, when you look at like the past 20 years of games, are there, you know, you cover games every day. You know, you're reviewing them, you're playing them, you're immersed in them. Are there certain games, I mean, starting right back at, you know, Doom was 93, so let's say the past 20 years, starting 1995. I mean, is there a game back then that still sticks with you as something that is, you know?
Yeah, released in the same year, LucasArts' X-Wing was just remarkable, and I don't know what the hell they're doing over there. Like, keep releasing those, like, every year. Like, come on.
I mean, flight sims as a genre, I think, has sort of pretty much disappeared, I feel.
Yeah, well, you have Star Citizen coming out.
Right.
A crowdfunded game that people can't play. But yeah, it was just such a transformative experience, like being in that cockpit of that X-Wing and just feeling like you're a part of those movies, those movie battles. That's one of those things you look back on now. It's probably doesn't hold up. Like, keep that memory in your mind. Don't go back.
Exactly.
You had, like, you had the Star Wars music, and if you had like a rolling like MT32 sound card, you get like the real like MIDI sound.
Right.
You'd just be like blown away by it. And you're right, like that was, you know, Wing Commander, X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, like there was that whole period of all those secret weapons, like all those great flight sims.
And it was like, at a time for PC, just all this great stuff coming out. Like you had Doom and then Doom 2 the next year. Like we were just getting assaulted with these great games. And they were all like really unique. And I think that's one of the great things about our industry is it is all experimentation. Like these developers are always taking a chance. That's why you see delays a lot, is they're doing something new that hasn't been done before. And that's, you know, we're still a really young industry. That's a thing that I don't think people really realize is we are still in these early stages of creating these experiences.
I mean, if you compare it to the film industry, I don't think any of us could really start naming all these classics 20 years into cinema.
Right.
You know, it took a few more decades to really figure out the storytelling in that. And what's fascinating with games is, we're reinventing the wheel every year. Every game, you know, every team is really pushing it. It's almost like you're trying to make a new camera for a film every time you sit down to make a movie.
Absolutely. Andrew, are there any games sort of in the past for you, whether it's PC or a console, that really sort of inspired you, that stick with you to this day?
I actually just had an experience. There's a museum on the pier in San Francisco called the Museum de Mécanique, and it's all of these really old coin-op machines, like going back to like even like the early 1900s coin-op like puppet machines. And they have a more modern section in the back showing some newer arcade games, and I say newer like as in the 90s, which is still like 20 years ago, right?
Right.
And I found a Cruising USA machine, and I lost it. I was like, oh my God! I spent so many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours on that game with my sister and my dad, playing, like memorizing all the.
Made into quarters.
Oh my gosh! My dad made me leave, but it was a really neat experience for me to sit down and play with my dad and be like, oh my gosh, do you remember this terrible Redwood Forest map? It was the worst. So I mean, stuff like that. I was a big arcade racing fan when I was younger. But I was also very much like through and through Nintendo console girl. Yeah. So I played a lot of Super Mario Brothers, like all the iterations. I love them all. But one of the games that really sticks with me, and I'm so glad that they rebooted it a couple years ago and had a new one this year, was Mortal Kombat. Yeah. Like Mortal Kombat 2 on SNES was like one of my favorites. I loved that game. I had a piece of paper with all the combos written down on it because I couldn't memorize them all. And like when I was playing against my sister, I'd always like look at my cheat sheet to like look what all the fatality combos were. So I really loved that. Those are some of my favorite experiences.
Very cool. Sess, as I said, you've been covering games for many, many years. You look back 90s. I mean, was there a game back then that really still sticks with you to this day?
Yeah.
Classic?
I mean, what I was thinking of is when I started out, it was GameSpot TV. It was 1998, and the first show aired in July. So we're already halfway through the year, and we covered Unreal, back when it was a single-player game.
Yep.
Then there was this game that came out the same year called Half-Life. Right. And there's this other game called The Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time. There was even Banjo-Kazooie.
It's a good year.
I mean, it was really, I was like, wow, this is a pretty good gig. I mean, this stuff keeps coming out at this quality level. I just remember that being quite awe-inspiring, because I think that's when, Ocarina obviously changed just how you even look at how you build a game. Unreal really set a new bar for how technology was going to do it. Half-Life changed storytelling in games. Yep. And back then, we did not know that, Epic Games was going to go become this, sort of house of technology that would license it. You'd never think that the guys who made Half-Life would have this massive service that would change the way that you buy games. It was all very kind of small and naive back then.
Absolutely. Pete, you mentioned a couple titles, but is there anything for you, like in the PC era, kind of 90s, that stuck with you?
Yeah, I think probably for me, I mean, there's a bunch of different ones, but the one that probably sticks out the most is XCOM, the original XCOM. It was a game I just spent an unbelievable amount of time playing. I remember, back in the infancy of the internet, where we didn't have it at work, and I'd go down to the library where I was working to get on their PC, which was on the internet, to go look for information if there was going to be another XCOM. Had the chance to work with the Gollops on a project that ultimately didn't see the light of day, but you guys remember Dreamland Chronicles, Freedom Ridge? Remember that? I'm dating myself. Half of you probably weren't even alive. But that was a spiritual successor to XCOM that they were making with Virgin that never made it. But in part, it's also because somebody managed to take that franchise, and it is, I think part of the inspiration that Reiner had for this panel is to take that and still maintain so much of that original game and what made it awesome, and bring it into the present day in a way that if you never played that original XCOM, you could play this one, and still it hits all of those same points. Like how much it hurts when you lose one of your squad members in a mission, and you're sitting there having that moment of like, I think I just quit this and start over. Like, I don't think I can live without Diego. So, like, the way that Firaxis took that franchise and managed to maintain all of the things that I loved about it. Because, one of the funny things is I have gone back and played some older titles, which I won't mention, but that just did not stand up to the test of time. The going up playing, it's kind of what you were saying, Andrea, about TV shows. Like, oh God, this is garbage. Like, I can't believe I actually was obsessed with this, because there's so much stuff that you would never live with or accept today that back then was, in the Wild West of PC development in the 90s. Like, oh yeah, this is totally fine and acceptable. But XCOM, I think, is one that still to this day is a formula that is awesome, and I love the fact that it's still around and doing well, and can't wait for the next one.
Yeah, you mentioned there's that DNA that I think, and I sort of feel Bethesda titles have a lot of that too. It's sort of that lineage of like these classic games that we can still see hints of that, and even how you guys have, like, I love single player narrative story driven stuff, and you guys have always been like very focused on that, I think, and like delivering great stories. And games like Wolf with it's like MP, like people say, oh, you have to have huge MP, or you can't ship it. It's like, no, you guys are like, hey, we can do a great story-driven game, and people will respond to that. Whereas a lot of the rest of the industry sometimes it's we're moving all to MP. It's like people don't need single player anymore. So I think you guys have obviously, it feels like the Bethesda culture, it feels like it's built off a lot of people that loved kind of PC games in the 90s and sort of have carried that lineage.
Yeah,
forward,
that's our DNA.
Yeah.
That's where Bethesda came from. We were a small mom, and I say we, I wasn't there from the very beginning, although it feels like I've been there from the beginning. But a small mom and pop PC developer who just ended up publishing their own games, where the developers were the folks that went down into the basement to actually package the products together to put it on a pallet to ship. That's pretty old school PC only roots, and the kind of studios that we have a lot of that same DNA. You look at it id Software. You go into their studios, like they have whole sections of their trophy case with all of this freeware and shareware awards, right? Like, does the current generation even know what the hell that means? That's what free to play. That's where free to play used to be. Kids. So, but that's where they came from as well. And guys like Rolf and Harvey at Arcane, and all of these guys who have been around for a long time, who still have their roots in that. And then guys like Machine Games, who were inspired by the stuff that they played for id and making Doom mods, and kind of really wanted to get into the game to the industry because of Wolfenstein 3D or Doom, and are able to bring that same mentality to something like the New Order, to take something like Wolfenstein that used to be relevant, but let's be honest, when those guys took it over, it's not like it was a household name, and kind of gave it a reboot that made it relevant again, and held on to the old stuff while bringing some new things to it.
Now, one thing that I think people always think about when you go from this title retro to real time is like there's certain tropes of game, and Doom's a great example of a game that back in the 90s had a certain feel, and you look at what you guys are building with Doom, what you guys got to play here, the style of gameplay. This is not Call of Duty with the Doom name on it. It's very much like Doom, which is not regen health, and there's no duck and cover. It's very visceral, in your face. Reiner, some of those tropes of games, you look at these different genres. Sometimes people say like, oh, well, games have to evolve, right? It's like
right.
Gameplay evolves, and it's like this is too old school, right? Some people like retro is a bad thing sometimes,
yes.
right? It's like it's broken. It's like and there are lots of games. Like I look back even at like the first Uncharted, and it's like there were elements of that were sort of feel broken now when you play it, and they're doing a reboot this fall, which I think is going to fix some of those things. But it was hard to figure out how to throw the grenade, and you had to like move your controller around with the 6-axis. It's like that just didn't work. So there's some things that are broken they have to fix. But do you think, is there something to be said about the retro feel being good and not a bad thing?
Oh yeah, I think who here has played Doom, by the way? The new Doom, yeah. The new Doom is retro, right? Like in design, and that's its strength. That's what we want from that game. Like we miss that experience. And does it feel like it's 20 years old? No, it feels brand new. It feels modern. It's fast as hell, really visceral. The limited sight lines just make it really intense. The visuals absolutely stunning. So I think it's a case where retro can be really good. Where it isn't like archaic or something like that, where it is actually like a strength, and that's what you want from that experience. And I think you have that in other games too, like Fallout. You want that DNA, those core tenets to remain in those games.
Andrew, are there other games where you mentioned like old school arcade games, things like that? Are there games that you go back though, and sometimes, like you said, like TV shows, you're like, I can't, like this game just does not hold up?
Oh, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus here and in front of the internet. I know you're trying to make me. I think what's interesting about this idea of retro to real time is that we're seeing almost a resurgence in this retro style. Games that are doing it really successfully, like Shovel Knight, for example, that has been across all different kinds of platforms, taking that platforming, exploration-based gameplay and also bringing in that like pixel-looking art style as well. And we're seeing that there's a lot of games that are doing that art style as well.
It's a great point you're making also about just the indie scene, I think, and there are a lot of people that can make these sort of games. They can't make necessarily $50 million ultra sort of realistic 3D games, but they can do really cool stylized indie games that feel retro but feel so right, and people love that, right? And Shovel Knight's a great example of a game that could have been made probably 15, 20 years ago. Wasn't made, but it's like it really holds up. Adam, is riffing on that idea of sort of these indie games with the retro feel and other sort of games that have a retro vibe. Do you yearn to have sort of more of that retro feel in today's games?
Well, the part that I like about retro, and I think what's so interesting that's what's happening in the indie scene is retro works when you look at the system. Like, that's timeless. Just that sense of just, you have an action, something happens on screen, you get into those really fun loops. I mean, that's kind of the core of a classic platformer, and I think a game like Spelunky really kind of keyed in on that. I think where retro doesn't always work is when you try to do retro technology. Go back and play Doom or like Dark Forces. You don't have free look. Trying to remind yourself that you can't look up or down, you have to play the game that way, is really, really hard. That those are the things I don't think stand the test of time. But what is really neat is people are understanding that games, the best games, I would say that for the Bethesda games, are these beautiful systems that allows the player to kind of experiment, to exploit, and to really discover. And those are the games I like to go back and play. And it's really fun to see really like an old classic platformer that works, and seeing people do these new retro-themed games that really kind of capture that spirit.
Pete, when you're working with the developers, I'm sure there are constant debates about, something that is feels very retro and people want to hold on to it. It's very special to them. It's like, this is how it used to play, and then there are other people who are like, no, it's like, for new people, like, they're not going to get it. It's too hard. This doesn't work. There's a better way. Are there a lot of those debates that happen at Bethesda?
Not retro specific. One of the interesting things that I kind of hear and listen to you guys talk about it is that in some ways, like, what is retro is a bit nebulous. You listen to Reiner talk about the current Doom and how it feels. It feels like the original Doom. Adam was saying earlier this morning, like, I feel like I'm 12 again when I'm playing Doom multiplayer. But it's not because of any one thing. It's not because of like the way the shotgun feels when you pull the trigger, or the movement speed, or the design of the level. It's almost this. It is some of that, but it's also just this intangible factor as far as kind of distilling a game down to its basics. And it sort of reminds me. Todd talks about this a lot when he goes back, and he's talked about going back to look at reviews of old Elder Scrolls games, and even gone to the team before. I've been in team meetings where he's talked about this, and he's put up quotes about stuff. And you read the quotes, and you would swear it came from a review of Skyrim, and it turns out it's from a review of Arena. Because when you strip out, the name, and you just look at the way the game made them feel, or how the graphics made them feel, or the ability to go anywhere, or the interactivity that, like, in a lot of ways, is what you're talking about. Like, it's those things that can translate well from generation to generation. It's not like, could I look up, down? Like, why the hell would you do that now? I mean, maybe you'd have a good reason. I can't think of one. But it's more about, like, when we talk about XCOM, right? That's like, what made XCOM brilliant was this idea of building a squad, and they have names, and they all mean something to me. And when they die, like, it bothers me because I've invested myself in them. That you can hold on to stuff like that without necessarily marrying yourself to the technology, or in the case of Fallout, for example, it's not actually as much about whether it's a third-person isometric game. It's more about, like, the world and making that come alive, and can you make that feel more immersive and more real, as opposed to like a specific view or a specific control scheme or whether the camera is first or third person. I think it boils down to some things that are a little bit more timeless. And so, we do have those discussions internally when we're talking about stuff, but it tends to be more about the feel of it. Like, how does this feel? What are we asking? Are there leaps that we're asking the player to make, whether it's how difficult it is, or how readily or not readily you get access to information or understand what's going on? Because you could have a game with no HUD, but the player knows exactly what's going on and what they're doing. And in some ways, that's a bit new school. In some ways, that's a bit old school. And it's just trying to find the right balance of how does the player feel? Like, do I know what I'm doing? Do I feel like I'm in control and I know what I'm doing, even if I really don't know what I'm doing?
It's a great point, because there are those timeless qualities of how a game feels, how it makes you feel, that I think we've all lived through. And now there are younger people playing games, developers that haven't. I'm sure there are guys working on the Doom team who probably weren't playing games when Doom came out, or weren't born when Doom was and it's like, but still they are able to capture that visceral feel of what Doom feels like. In the past, like 10 to 15 years, we talked about some stuff in the 90s. I'll go down the line again. Are there other games, Reiner, that more recently, and not necessarily in the last 2 years, but in the last 10 to 15 years, that have really sort of inspired you at sort of halfway through the retro to real time? Is there something midpoint that stands out to you as a game that felt like a transitional game for you?
The crazy thing is, 10 years ago was like, we're in the heart of like Xbox 360, right? Like, I mean, it's like
most of these people don't know what that is. Do you want to explain what it is? It's like a PC, but not as good. There you go. I know my audience.
I'm a console guy.
Hey, I am too. We can be console.
All right, there you go.
And then, I mean, even for me, like I was very much a PC guy sort of through the 90s and 2000s, and then it was all 3D accelerators, all that, and then eventually it did get to a point though where consoles got a little bit closer to PC, or at least you could move games between them, and it's like people struggled sometimes to fit a game into Xbox 360. It was all better on PC, but there was a way to experience some of those games, and it felt like the console and PC spaces started to merge in many ways, I think, sort of 2005 beyond, and certainly there are games that are only on one or the other, but seemed like those games sort of started to come together. Is there a game for you, Reiner? I mean, maybe it's one that was on PC as well, or?
Yeah, I'll go PC. The whole MMO, the whole MMO boom. And just having that first experience in that world where you see other players running around.
Warcraft? Or
for me, it was EverQuest, yeah. So before that was Ultima and all that, right? But yeah, it was just one of those mind-blowing moments where you're in this world and you have no idea what you're doing. There's people running around, there's shops. And it's like you just start thinking, like, whoa, where is this going to go from here? Like, because this is really primitive. But I mean, we've seen where it's gone. I mean, people lose their lives in these games. And it's one of those things where you can just be playing and you look at the clock and it's like 5 a.m. and you're like, oh my goodness, what have I done?
No, it's fun to see those, and a lot of those genres, I think, just started out in such simple form on PC, like MMO, and I remember even like RTS games like Command and Conquer and Warcraft and things like that, and to see now how that sort of has all led to, I think, you look at the MOBAs and League and all that, and those are like, those are RTS games, effectively, but look how huge they are, and I think back to the roots of like Red Alert or something like that on the PC. Yeah,
and then us terrible console players, we we have MMOs coming now. We got Elder Scrolls Online coming, Neverwinter, DC. So we're starting to see these experiences that, back in the day when they tried to bring an MMO to console, it'd be like this really terrible EverQuest Adventures. Yeah. Just a completely different experience. But now, right?
I totally forgot that was.
Yeah.
But now you have the full experience. And sometimes you get to play with PC players, like Final Fantasy 15 or 14 is shared, cross-platform. So yeah, I would say that was one of those big moments where it was just a kind of a jaw-dropping experience where it's just, this is crazy. There's like hundreds of people here.
So yeah, the hint of something bigger. Andrea, was there anything for you 10, 15 years ago that stands out to you?
Well, a really pivotal point in my kind of love of games, because we were talking earlier, I took a pretty substantial break from games when I was in college. Didn't really play a lot at all. And then when I started freelancing,
What drew you back? Which game?
It was Guitar Hero.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I know that sounds probably crazy to this crowd, but like I was so deep into Guitar Hero, and then Rock Band, came out after that. I spent like thousands of hours between those two franchises playing. Like I would have a friend, this one, my best friend Chuck. He would always come over. We would practice for like hours, like 3 or 4 hours at a time, and then every Tuesday we would go to this one bar and compete in the competition, but we would have to practice first. Yeah. But we would practice all week long. Like he would come over, and the two of us would play for just hours and hours and hours together. And that to me was like my welcome back party to video games, and that's when I got all of the new consoles and was spending a lot of time playing my Wii. I mean, like the Wii was such an interesting moment in video games for a multitude of reasons, right? Like not only did they introduce motion gaming, which completely revolutionized, the console business, but also like it was a new era for Nintendo doing bigger games for a new generation. I mean, I love Super Mario Galaxy. I really, really want them to make Galaxy 3. I've been asking for it forever. I'm like, on Wii U would be fantastic, or NX, whatever their new console's going to be. But so I would say that to me is I look at the beginning of the music and rhythm genre as like a really pivotal point for my personal video game history.
Very cool.
Nintendo released some good games on Wii, but can we say the Wii kind of sucked, right? We can say that now, right?
I mean, okay, listen. Games that weren't made by Nintendo weren't great on Wii, right? Like, I mean, Nintendo it's a whole other conversation for another time. Nintendo struggled with a third party, all right? But Nintendo games, there were so many great games on Wii. That's a whole other conversation for another time. We'll talk about it later.
No, I mean, always in the story. Seth, what about you?
It's not just because I'm at QuakeCon. I think one of those big moments for me, when MMOs are getting really popular, I wasn't gravitating towards them. I think one of the big issues when you're in press is the long-term relationship you need with an MMO. Your job doesn't really allow for that because you have to keep on moving on to the next game and to the next game. But I really like the idea of this big, massive world that you were exploring. I just wanted to play by myself and not with other people who I didn't know. Yeah. And then this game called Morrowind came by our office. And it just, everything I ever wanted was suddenly happening right in front of me. Yeah. And that's one where I would stay up so late. I would feel like kind of dirty because I really had accomplished nothing. It's like, what's over there? It's like, I want to go look over there. I'm like, oh, I'm dead. So reload. What's over there? It just, that kind of obsessive. It wasn't even so much I wanted to play the game and build my character. I just wanted to see what there was.
You want to
see
explore.
In this world.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just that. And I think that made me feel more like a kid, where like you see the world is kind of filled with wonder and possibility, and then as you get older, employment, chips away at that, and it really was that. It really was that kind of beautiful moment of this is, I think, what I always imagined games were supposed to be. Yeah. And yeah, that was probably about 300 hours of my life playing that game.
Wow.
Pete, you were obviously at Bethesda. It could be a Bethesda game. It could be another game. Is there something that stands out to you?
Well, for me, it's a number of things. That time that Seth is talking about, as somebody who played a ton of RPGs and was an Ultima fan and a Gold Box fan, that window where Morrowind was a thing, Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, Into Oblivion, just what happened in that period where RPGs moved out of being this kind of niche, that's really cute, to these, like, some of the best stuff that was happening in gaming was happening in that genre. It was a really cool thing to both to play and experience as well as be a part of. That window there, Morrowind to Oblivion, moving from the sort of one generation to the next, Xbox to Xbox 360, and kind of pushing the boundaries on what we could do to Oblivion. I mean, the jump from Morrowind to Oblivion visually, particularly on higher end machines and some of the stuff you could do with a really sweet PC was pretty amazing. That was really like almost a sea change moment for us as well as for a lot of stuff in the industry. I mean, BioWare was really coming into their own in that period. So there's a window there of where it was just like one after the other that we almost had this joke where it was like, we knew Ray and Greg. I knew those guys back from writing at the Adrenaline, but we had like an implicit understanding with Ray and Greg. Like, we don't ship games in the same year. Like, this year's ours, next year's yours, this year's ours. Like, we're not ever gonna. But it was great. Like, just sort of going back and forth and really kind of trying to push what RPGs could do. I thought it was a pretty cool time in gaming.
And hopefully some of those will come backwards compat now, Xbox 360, right? It's like we have all. That's the thing is now we have all these classics. Hopefully, or classics 10 years ago that hopefully people will be able to play and experience now. And that's what will be interesting with some of those games is like, as more come online, it's like, when people go back and play them, it's like, what's the experience like? Because sometimes, like, even though the feel was there back then, the controls, or it's so hard to like roll back. It's like I can't believe.
Look, I'll probably get in a lot of trouble for this, but I generally have not let my kids play our games just because of their age and like, no, this is for an older audience. I finally relented and told my youngest, who just turned 12, that he could play an Elder Scrolls game. Yeah. I still believe, regardless of what some ratings agencies say, that Oblivion is a teen-rated game and not mature. And he was asking me if he could play Morrowind. I was like, no, don't play Morrowind. He's like, why not? I was like, it's not good. Like, play Oblivion instead. Like, I go back and play Morrowind, and I love that game, and I still bear the scars of developing and getting that game out the door. But it's just not one for me. Like, I'm going to push my kid to spend time on something. I shoved him towards Oblivion just because I think it holds up so much more. And there was such a bigger leap. Yeah. Scrolling through 47 choices and dialogue on things you wanted somebody to talk about is just not okay.
I remember, I really wanted to go back because Morrowind, I mean, I just love that world, like that mysterious, swampy,
it's a great world, and like the world design and like all of the houses and stuff, like from a world design standpoint, it is amazing. But
then
some
you
of the
try to track quests.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my.
Figure out where the hell you are.
Like, I need a whole notebook telling me what I'm supposed to be doing.
Exactly.
Unacceptable.
Well, Geoff, I want to know what yours is. You never told us.
Good question. I would say probably, I mean, Half-Life was seminal for me in sort of like 98, 97, because I was up at Valve, kind of when that company first started, kind of tracking the development of that, and that was a game that I still remember. Those games where you remember like the moment where you were when you first started playing it, and I remember like I got an early version of Half-Life, and there was like a thing called, I think it was the Day One or something, and it was like came with a graphics accelerator. You could play like the first part of Half-Life. And I remember getting that, and it was like a 15-minute demo or something. But I just kept playing that. It was like Halloween night. There were all these like trick-or-treaters coming by my house. They were ringing the bell, and I just wasn't even paying attention to it because I was just like stuck again and again and again. So that was an amazing game. And then I'm trying to think like in 2000s. I mean, I think the first BioShock was something that really like I mean that was later, but that really like still sticks out to me as a game that really was just like pretty phenomenal. And yeah, I started to move more towards console stuff. I think I was very much PC, and then started doing more console stuff. And then yeah, I think like you think in the past, yeah, that was big for me. I mean, Red Dead I thought was an amazing game.
Oh yeah,
I love that. We're getting more recent now, and yeah, I don't know. You guys may have more recent ones as well. But the thing that I think is interesting to me is when I go back and I mentioned Uncharted. I went back and played Uncharted 1, and it just felt so broken to me. And it's like you have these amazing memories of it, and it's like it just doesn't work. Or there are things with, even like Grand Theft Auto games, you go back and play, and it's like, oh my God, this is so painful. It's like you die on a mission, and you're like sent back 30 minutes of gameplay. Right. Ever survived. We used to like in action games where you have to use cheat codes. Or we remember like old Doom, Quake games, like you're always using cheat codes to get through things because they were just too difficult. And now it's like
not everyone, Geoff.
Oh, please. Oh, you tried once or twice. Come on. God mode. Come on. Finish them all at extreme difficulty. But yeah, it's just interesting to see that there's certain games that do hold up, as Pete mentioned, and the feel of what they were like back then. When you go back, it's like, oh, it's so painful to play them. And I wonder, because the idea of like remakes is something that we talk about retro real time. That's one thing where people, some people literally try and remake games. Other people try and take the inspiration of those games forward and sort of, Doom. It's in a way, I guess it's sort of a reboot in a way of the franchise or something new, but it maintains the feel. Do you guys is there a lot of interest for you guys in playing like remakes? Like,
yes.
Would you play
Absolutely.
like a remake of Morrowind?
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, no question. Better
Pete's
quest
like,
tracking.
no, don't do it.
He's shaking his head.
But see, I think
It's called Skyrim.
I think
Exactly.
All you get.
Been out for 4 years. You're welcome.
I'm always worried that, as a game industry, that we're losing some of our history because we're always kind of like consuming our past and moving forward. So I've never had an issue when you see HD remakes of big games. It's fascinating to go back and play them again. I mean, I would definitely say that with Eco and
Shadow. Yeah.
Thank you, and Shadow of the Colossus. But Eco, it's one of those, I'm like, I forgot how to play this, and it doesn't tell you.
No.
I mean, it's just one of
No,
those
it does
moments
not.
of just like, I was a much more patient person 12 years ago than I am now.
I've actually never played either of those, and I just got it for my birthday from my wife. So now I'm keenly interested in just how good or bad this experience is about
No,
to be.
it's good. I'd say
good,
have
yeah,
a
it's worth
laptop
it.
open and just kind of, some of them might guide you through.
All those games that we used to put, I mentioned with GTA, so you used to put up with so much. And now
incredible.
it's like, you're just like, what? I replayed like for 40 minutes just because this
Yeah,
doesn't work. And it's like, so that's the thing is that you see remakes like, like Master Chief Collection will take all the Halos and sort of bring them back. And, you guys are doing the Fallout Anthology, but those are just the games as
They're just
they were,
like
right?
they were, right?
Is that, I mean, Pete, when you think of classic Bethesda games, you're shaking your head. I mean, I imagine it's a trade-off because it's like to go back and remake something is time that the developers can't be making something new, right?
Right. Well, and then the question becomes like, well, what does it mean if you were hypothetically? Because it's like, I guarantee this is never going to happen. But like, if you were going to remake Morrowind, like, what does that actually mean? Because you're not just porting it to this platform. Like, have you seen those textures? Did you see what games look like back into like that? That is not going to hold up. So now you're going to art out an entirely new thing. Am I keeping that crappy dialogue system, or am I changing? So, like, well, if I'm doing all of that, why don't I just make a new game instead? Because that seems way more fun. And I'm a big believer, particularly when you're talking about like that length of time. Like, just let them be. Like, like they're fine. Like we've gotten asked, would you guys consider remaking, the original Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, kind of in the vein of these? And again, like, no, like those games are perfect the way they are, which is exactly as the developers had intended, exactly the way they wanted somebody to experience. And if they don't hold up for you now, then don't play them. But it doesn't mean that somebody else ought to be going back and saying, no, this is now the new original Fallout with this other take or this complete. Like, those games ought to stay for all time exactly. Again, this is just me, but that, I think they're perfectly fine the way they are. Folks still play them. Yeah. They're still really good. So I don't think going back and like doing a new take on an old game is the right way to go.
Yeah. Well, I think certain genres of game lend themselves better to being remade. I mean, we could look at a game like the Gears of War Ultimate Edition, which is coming out next month. Right. And that game is a much more enclosed experience. It's much more linear. You're talking about redoing a bunch of cutscenes, but like trying to recreate an open world is a whole other undertaking, right? So,
and what you expect from open world has changed so much too, and the density and the experience. As Pete said, it's like you're basically making an entirely new game anyways. So why not?
Yeah. Well, The Witcher 3 has ruined it for everybody going forward. So, I mean, unless you hit that bar now, like, you know what I mean, like super up there. Or we can debate about that later too. So I think that remakes and reboots are great when it makes sense. Like, I think Ego is a really good example because that game...
It's a piece of history.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that that's something every gamer should play. If you guys have not played it, pick it up. You can get it for PS3. It's fantastic. I mean, it looks exactly like The Last Guardian, but whatever. That's another conversation for another time. But I think that remakes are good. And obviously, the community agrees. People keep buying them, and companies are going to keep making them as long as there's a demand for them.
Yeah, but like as you're doing with Fallout Anthology, obviously those games still can be played today on today's machine, especially PC, which is much, PC obviously is much more history there you can do. Whereas like now with Xbox One, there's all these people saying, make Black Ops 2 work on Xbox One, and it's the backwards compatibility because it's not there. Whereas with PC on Steam, I mean, you guys have the entire history of Bethesda pretty much on Steam, right?
Yep, exactly, and cheap, $99.
Buy now. All right, we got like 10 minutes.
That's not for these guys. Everybody in here already owns it. These guys, they already got it.
They got it all. If you guys have questions, feel free to line up here. We got about 10 minutes left. We'd love to hear what you guys, if you have memories too of favorite games, we'd love to hear them too, and we can riff off that. Go ahead.
I apologize in advance if I sound like a zombie. I haven't slept since
Wednesday night. We're all in this together, Butter.
Because QuakeCon. Pete, I love you. Thank you.
I love you too, sir.
Some of the best games on the planet. Adam, there are very few credible game reviewers left in the world. I'm not asking you to get back into reviewing games, but would you consider getting into a room with a webcam and a soapbox?
Hey, I want to play this out. I haven't. Has anyone ever seen a soapbox? Like, is that how soap was sold once upon a time by the box? I mean, we all know what the term is.
Yeah.
And why is it that that became the object that someone would then stand on to proclaim that they know something better than somebody else?
This would be way better if you were on a soapbox in a
Right
room.
now.
I think we just got episode 1 right there.
Maybe one day. That's very kind of you to obviously ask me, but maybe one day.
One day, Seth.
Yeah.
All right. Next question.
This is kind of a retro real-time games media question.
Sure.
So like, I come from a family where when I was a kid, we could only get like 3 or 5 new games a year at maximum. And so I had stuff like Game Informer, which had, you know, cover stories and leading stories and stuff like that to kind of highlight, like, if you're only going to get 3 or 5 games, these are the games you should get. And I'm wondering, like, how in new media sources like YouTube and Twitch and all these new ways of getting this information, do you still have that same, like, highlighting, this is the game that you need to get if you only have $60 to spend money on games?
Yeah, you said had in past tense. Yeah, we're still around. We have we have a magazine. I mean, it's, you know, Andy McNamara, our editor-in-chief, and I, you know, we always look for the games that have that it factor. You know, sometimes we swing and miss. We put crappy games on the cover that we think are going to be good, but they just don't turn out at the end because you see them so early. But we are looking for those games that we think, yeah, you should buy this game. You know, our critics do a hell of a job too. You know, we have a core review team that, you know, we don't outsource, we don't freelance. You know, it's just we know these guys, we know the games they like, they don't like, what beats they should be on, and all that. So, read the magazine; it's still there.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's more of a, like, I think y'all do an awesome job, and I'm wondering how in the digital world do you highlight, like, this is the game? Like, what tool set do you use? Like, do you have, you know, I mean, you have obviously the Game Informer homepage that is great. There's a big picture of something, and you're like, oh, Doom, I should play Doom.
I should play Doom.
I'll take a stab at this because
Yeah,
my
yeah.
media experience is all digital. I've only ever done digital. I've never worked for print, like an actual magazine. And the way that we kind of, you know, like at game trailers, when, you know, we look at reviews, it's tough because what's important to you as a gamer might not be important to me as a gamer, or to what Sessler likes playing. He might not care what you care about. And so it's tough to pick just a couple games, especially now in the era of development that we're in, when there's just so many teams doing so much incredible work. There's easily going to be at least a dozen, you know, really good games a year. I mean, and Geoff, you could probably speak to the difficulty that you and your team goes through whittling down nominees for the Game Awards,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it's the thing that's different now. It's like, I mean, there's just so many different ways for the consumer to experience a game. I mean, you can watch someone stream it on Twitch. You can see on social what your friends are talking about. It's like, you know, like Rocket League or something like that's, you know, maybe a publication said how great it was. But I think it's just people just get a general sense of word of mouth, like, oh, I should try this out. And like I remember years ago, it would be like, well, you maybe have to try and get a demo if you can on one of the cover mount discs for PC Gamer or something to try it out. And you know, now you can just, I mean, you can watch streams of it and all that stuff. I mean, people don't even need to make demos of games because they're so accessible. So I think you can make a lot of choices for yourself. But yes, it's also difficult because there's so much stuff out there, and you want that trusted voice to say, like, this is the Game Informer seal of approval. And it's like there are fewer of those places that can be like, you know, really endorse it. But I still think, you know, we find this with E3 and with Game Awards. It's like there are certain media outlets that when they, you know, we sort of, you know, publications like Game Informer, they have lots of people playing games all day, so you don't have to, and you can trust them. Well, you probably do anyways.
My one piece of advice of that is, and you know, you can obviously you have an outlet like Game Informer that you like, but I think it's better to have a relationship with a particular reviewer. I mean, that's how, like, when it comes to like books or film, like I like to go to the New York Times and I like A.L. Scott. I don't always. He doesn't like everything I'm going to like, but over the time of reading him, I've gotten to understand his personality. And so when he gives an opinion, I'm not looking for just a full endorsement, this is good, this is bad. I see, okay, he didn't seem to like this, but that's something that I like. And I can feel myself sort of being guided that way. I think, especially right now, that's the best way to go.
It's a really good point, which is that, like, an institution, a magazine, giving a review doesn't mean as much as, like, who wrote it. And there are sites that I generally agree with that have written reviews that I completely disagreed with about whatever it is, some game from somebody else. But it's about understanding, like, who is that person? Oh, like, that person doesn't like the kind of stuff that I like, so why would we agree on, like, if we just met and randomly talked about game Y, we would come to completely different opinions. So it's not just like, oh, Game Informer and everything that everybody there says. You really need to understand and read, like, who is it that's writing it, and what did they say about this, and what did they say about other stuff, and to the point that Geoff was making, there are so many outlets out there to, if you want to see what it's like to play the game, like, I guarantee you right now, somebody is streaming it. Like, go watch them play and see, like, that looks like it would be a lot of fun, or no, it doesn't seem like my thing, or they seem really frustrated. Like, there's actually, I think, so many more ways, and your point is, like, well, there's so many, how do you pick the right one? I think the answer, though, is to understand who's saying what and whether you agree with them, and then to, browse a little bit and get information from different places, because, there is so much stuff out there, and there is so much good stuff. You need to, you need to pick and choose.
Cool, thanks. Y'all are all geniuses.
Thank you. Next question.
Hey guys, you mentioned simulators earlier. You mentioned Star Citizen. Have any of you gotten to play the Elite Dangerous and seen how that's changed from its early beginnings, or perhaps tried it with an Oculus? It's incredible, the scope of it with that.
I haven't seen it in Oculus or recently.
I have seen it in Oculus, and I mean, Oculus is an incredible technology, right? And it's the immersive experience is indescribable, really. If you haven't tried an Oculus, it's really difficult to explain to somebody just what that experience feels like. But I think that that's a really great example of, this fits perfectly in that retro to real time, and how they've really taken something that had like the deep PC roots, and they brought it into this really modern era. And the game looks beautiful, and it has, the scope of it is really massive. But I also think that a game like that is speaking to a very specific audience, and it's tough to know, like, does that audience want it to feel like the original, or do they want it to feel new? It's like that same idea that we were talking about with Doom. Like, do we want it to feel retro, or do we want it to be like a really fresh, new take on an existing genre?
Yeah, I think like the flight sim genre with VR in general, I think will probably bring it back.
Yeah,
a
big
little bit,
time.
just in whether it's Oculus or Vive or other things. Morpheus, it's I think there's something about like being able to sit in that cockpit and being able to look around. It's just a very natural fit to you sitting on your couch and kind of looking around. So I think you'll see more sort of flight sim games. The question is, do you want to play those games for 10, 12 hours, or is it more of a short session experience? I mean, those are things I think we still have to figure out. But yeah, I think generally like a space sim or flight sim, I think we'll see that genre depending on how VR takes off.
The one part I find fascinating is with the VR, assuming it does take off, you don't need to even have that much game there. I have a good friend of mine, he's working on a game called Narcosis. He's billing it as an underwater survival horror game. And when I would go over and I would check his game out, I've never been underwater in a submarine. And there's just so much novelty to that I just wanted to just tootle around and explore the bottom of the ocean, and I forgot that there was a game there. I didn't even need that much challenge to keep me absolutely engaged.
Like the exploration of it.
Yeah, that it's just when you're in VR, you are in something that is just so remarkable and novel that I think it was Shu Yoshida was trying to say you need to look at this as its own medium, and it's not like you can just take the taxonomy of games and just plop it into VR and somehow you just enhanced it.
Millennium Falcon and walk around it. I mean, that's like enough for probably some type of short session experience. Good question.
Right.
We've got.
Thank you.
Let's see. Yeah, so I guess I don't know if we can go long. Can we go long, Pete? We allowed?
Sure. My show.
Sure.
Thank you, Masters, for allowing this question.
Good start, sir.
First of all, two things. Adam Sessler, those are sweet kicks.
Oh, thanks, man.
And I'd like to thank all developers who support PC modding and make their own toolkits, because since we're talking about going back to old video games and stuff, I think modding is huge to adding hours and hours of replay value. And I wanted to know, what are your experiences and thoughts about modding and modding going forward?
Modding's, I mean, I remember mods when I was like Doom, and it was like, the Star Wars Doom mod and stuff
There was
like
like
that.
a good Matrix mod. What was
Yeah,
that in
Matrix,
Unreal?
There was a Simpsons one.
Yeah, there was a Homer Simpson in Quake 2.
Simpson,
I remember
Quake.
playing
I
that
remember
a
actually
lot.
my brother and I, we would do like, you could even make like sound packs for Doom. I think before you could do mods, you could do like sound, you could replace all the sound files, and like you'd have little like phrases you could like put into the game, and that was just fun to record waves and just put them into Doom. So yeah, all that stuff was really fun back in the day. Actually, I miss some of that, crazy creativity, because that was back when like people could do anything with IPs and just on PC just go crazy with stuff. But yeah, mods are really fun. I mean, we were talking about this morning in a bonus round taping. It's like a lot of the guys who develop games today, I think, really came out of the mod scene for like Doom and Quake and Build Engine, all that stuff. Like that's where a lot of people learned to make games, because that was before there were even schools to go to.
For sure. And it's, to your question, sir, like that's something that we still feel like is a big part of like who Bethesda is and who part of our DNA. If you look at Bethesda Game Studios and id specifically, like two great examples of folks that have for a decade or more done amazing stuff in the mod space, and a big part of what those games are doing now, like the next Doom, has a massive, major focus on modding that isn't some other tool that you have to download and figure out how the hell to do anything. It works right in the game, and when you want to check out what you're building, you press a button and you're instantly in the playing. Like we want to get more people into creating stuff and sharing stuff, and Fallout 4, it's an effort to not only have PC mods grow, but to bring it to all platforms so that people who have their stuff made on the PC have that many more people playing it. You look at a game like Skyrim, I don't remember what the number is exactly. I think it's 8%, something like that, of the people who played Skyrim ever downloaded a mod. And if you're making mods, wouldn't you want the other two platforms to be able to download and play your stuff? And that's what we're trying to do. That's that old school people getting into games, being creative, trying new stuff, bringing it to everybody and letting them all try it. I think it's a big part of who we are and something we plan to support in a big way going forward.
I think that one of the most exciting things about mods is not just the people getting to play the mods, but for me, as someone who has such a strong background in digital video, I love watching content made by people using mods. Like when I was at Machinima, we were working with video creators to do actual machinimas within the game, and we had this one creator who did the funniest stuff in Skyrim with mods. I don't know if you guys know Manslayer. If you watch any of his stuff on YouTube, he is genius. The stuff that's the kind of stuff that's really exciting to me as a fan. Yep. I do not have any skill level with mods whatsoever. Like, I don't know how to make them. I barely know how to download them. But I love watching people make video content using mods. So that's really exciting that you guys are opening that up to more creators.
That's a very good point.
All right, we're going to move on
Thank
to
you, sir.
Thank you.
What is, according to this text message, our final question? I'm sorry.
Well, we could talk to you out in the crowd, obviously, if you have some questions.
Yeah. Go ahead.
All right, you've all been talking about replaying old games and how you sometimes aren't used to like how it used to be. I want to know if like you've ever had trouble with remembering how to proceed, or like.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are games. I mean, I remember like old, but I grew up playing like adventure games, like old like Sierra games, something, and you go back and it's like, I have no idea. Like you lose that knowledge, whereas like you remember sort of scenes and sequences, like movies. You'll remember great sequences or great lines of dialogue, but I think the actual mechanics of solving puzzles and stuff, I can't just go back and be like, oh, I remember this Doom level exactly.
No, it was a few years back, because I was, I think, moderating a panel for the new XCOM at PAX. I was like, oh, I better go back and play, the old XCOM. Downloaded that and just sat there like an idiot. I'm like, there's no instruction manual. It's not telling me what to do. I'm just looking at that screen, and I know I played this once. I have no idea how to proceed. I just kind of quietly turned it off and
slunk away.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why you got to go to YouTube. You can find walkthroughs for anything on YouTube nowadays. But yeah, I think that's what's exciting, though, is the challenge, putting yourself back into that place to go, can I solve this without looking at a guide, right? Like paper guides and phone lines used to be the thing of the past. Or now you can, walkthroughs are available a lot of times before the games even come out today. So I think it's fun to kind of have that challenge, but also like, if I'm going to play Grim Fandango Remastered, I'm probably going to watch, somebody else play it first,
Yeah, you want a real dungeon crawl, like go load up Ultima 3 and navigate a dungeon with any kind of skill or efficiency. Like, all I remember is having graph paper and having to chart out exactly how long each hallway was and where each room was, because you couldn't figure out where the hell you were or where the hell you're going otherwise. Like, go do that again and see how much fun you have before, like, oh my God, please bring mini maps to this game so I know where the hell I've been and where I'm going.
On the note of strategy guides, though, Pete, this is something a lot of people don't know about you, is you wrote a lot of those big Elder Scrolls strategy guides and Fallout strategy guides for Bethesda. Those
Morrowind,
big book ones?
Oblivion, Fallout 3, and the strategy guide. Was it yesterday? The Morrowind strategy guide is as close as I have come to dying in this industry. That strategy guide almost killed me. But back then, they were super important because there wasn't this huge tome of information where you could just, like, I'm stuck and there's 45 videos on YouTube showing you exactly how to do it. Like, that was pretty much the only repository of information. And again, if you've played Morrowind recently and tried to figure out where the hell you're going for a quest and gotten no information whatsoever on where you're going, it turns out
strategy guide is still available.
that was back when we designed games that required a strategy guide to know what the hell you were doing. That was a little marketing ploy of ours to get an extra 20 bucks out of you.
I need strategy guides because it's like, for me, I can't remember what happened yesterday. So it's like Memento, so I'll have like a guide and I'll like mark, like, you were here.
Remember that? If you happen to play a game like Metroid Prime, I might have stepped away for 3 days, and you boot it up, and you're like, which direction am I supposed to go? I mean, it really is just that, I guess I'm restarting the game from the beginning.
Too much fun. All right, well, it's been a great panel. Thanks for all your questions. Thanks for joining us here. Thanks to the panelists, and have a
good
great
job, guys.
rest of
Good job,
QuakeCon.
guys.
We'll be around if you guys want to chat. Thanks. Good afternoon.
Thank you.